Meeting of the Select Board, School Committee, and Finance Committee for November 7th. We will start off with a Pledge of Allegiance, led by Nate.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just in case anybody doesn't know, my name is Christina Green. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. So our first agenda item is open forum. If anybody in the room has something that they would like to say or comment that isn't on the agenda later, you can come to the front of the room. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. Wait a second. I'm not seeing anything, but if people have questions later, again, please feel free to come up, or if you're on Zoom, use the raise hand feature, or you can type in the Q&A. So the second item is the review of our FY25 budget impacts. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan O'Donnell and Chris Chu.
I'm just going to pull the screen up here. Okay, so diving in, we're going to start with a quick review of the impacts from the FY25 reductions. So on the town side, overall, we had reduced staffing by 9.3 FTEs. Part of that was the 2 police officers, the 2 firefighters, and 1 dispatcher. We did reduce 1 heavy equipment operator in highway as well. And then our sustainability coordinator, which was funded using one-time funds in FY24, we did reduce that position. Our record supervisor in finance and accounting was also reduced by half-time. We backfilled that with a non-benefit person, and then we reduced our DPW business manager to a half-time, so it's a non-benefit position at this point in time. In addition, we also reduced the hours that the library is open from 55 to 50. 50 is the lowest we can go and still maintain our funding from the state. We reduced seasonal staff and intern support in public works and our land use. So, all those part-time people we did not budget for this year. And some larger reductions. The health insurance trust appropriation was reduced by $540,000 from the override budget, just because of the all the layoffs we had with the people. So our insurance costs did go down. And then our OPEB contribution, which is our other post-employment benefits, such as health insurance, we did not follow the policy that we have in place, and we reduced that allocation by $375,000. Then across the board, of course, we had many expense accounts were reduced. We actually have a detailed list on our annual town meeting website. And then we're applying more recurring funds to offset the budget for the year as well.
I'm just going to slide this a little bit. So thank you. So we have 2 different slides here showing folks the impact, the staffing impacts on the FY25 for Westford Public Schools. With the failed override, we had 21.4 instructional staff members reduced. And you can see them listed there. So it was the 3 elementary literacy specialists, 2 middle school reading teachers, 9.4 classroom teachers at Westford Academy, 4 middle school interventionists, so that was 2 math interventionists and 2 reading interventionists at the middle school level, and then 2 elementary classroom teachers and 1 library media specialist at Westford Academy. In the original proposal, we were also planning to reduce 1 counselor at Westford Academy, but we have a retirement that's taking place this year, and so we decided to use one-time funds to support that position so that we weren't letting somebody go knowing that the position would be opening up soon. So that was 1 adjustment. And then we were able to bring 2 elementary teachers back from our original proposal after we increase the offset from our food service account to supplement head custodian positions. So we're able to then free that money up in the operating budget to then keep 2 of the elementary teachers, because originally we thought we would have to reduce 4. So that's not bringing back the 2 that were listed above. We were going to have to go with 4, but we only went with 2. The 26 elementary interventionists which were part of that original proposal, we were able to restore those based on the amendment that took place at town meeting. And at the time, we didn't know where the funding was going to come from specifically, but then we did get increased state aid, which event, is that accurate?
That
Dan?
is accurate,
Okay.
which we got in July, actually,
Right,
so.
right. But at the time, we weren't sure exactly how we were going to be able to do that. So then the next slide, these are the reductions that we had already planned to make for FY '25 in order, based on enrollment and in an attempt to bring the override amount request to a lower number. So these were different things that we started with, and then we also made adjustments when we were going through our budget season before we ever got to the override vote. So we had 30.2 staff reductions there. The enrollment piece was 8.2 elementary, middle school, and WA classroom teachers, just spread out throughout all of those different levels. We outsourced our special education van drivers, so there were 18 people who were impacted there. And there was one administrative position here in central office that we merged. We took their duties and we split those up among other people. And then we had 3 different administrators, our curriculum director, and then 2 curriculum coordinator positions. So last year, in the spring, 60 people were impacted and ended up receiving letters in that time. So one of the things we also, it's important to kind of remind people, is not only did the impact that it have on the schools, but just even the staff and morale this whole process has in the first place was something that we were very concerned about. But in the end, we had 20 teachers and 3 administrators who were laid off. We had 22 teachers and 2 administrators who were reassigned. And at the end of all this, 4 positions were able to be absorbed by retirement and resignations. That brings us to where we are in FY '25.
Any questions from the committee? Nate?
Just curious, Dr. Chu, on the reductions to lower the amount. I assume this has been ad nauseum discussed at the school committee, but just from a high level, the 1.0 curriculum director and the 2 curriculum coordinators, what does that do to the work that goes on as far as curriculum goes in the district, losing those positions?
Well, so the curriculum director was our director of equity, curriculum, and instruction, and so that was the person who was overseeing the entire curriculum department that we have, and so we had a number of curriculum coordinators supporting the schools. Losing that position was obviously, it's a leadership position that's then all of those responsibilities have had to go to somebody else, and or some things aren't getting done, right? So that's the impact there. The 2 curriculum coordinator positions that we lost, we actually had K to 2 curriculum coordinators and 3 to 5 curriculum coordinators. So those are the grades, right? So pre-K to 2 and then grades 3 to 5. And what we've done is we've merged those into just pre-K to 5. So now instead of 4 people, there's only 2 people there, and so they're now supervising twice the number of staff members that they had. They're supporting twice the number of teachers throughout the entire district. So the work is still being supported, but I think what you're asking of the individuals to do has increased dramatically, and so it's made it more difficult for the teachers to get as immediate support as they would have in the past. But there isn't a curriculum piece in the district in terms of what we're working and teaching the students that's not being supported. It just has meant that now the bandwidth of those individuals has decreased tremendously.
Thanks.
Any other committee members have questions or comments? So I do see something in the question and answer, and Megan O'Connell is asking, I would like to see the school department explore in greater depth the potential savings by bringing busing in-house. A simple review of my analysis by Jenny Lynn still showed a significant yearly savings. Why is that not being discussed?
We can talk about that later. Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about the efficiencies, we have looked at that. The analysis that we did, we actually took that methodology and we just updated the numbers, and where there were some mistakes, we put in the correct numbers. And so the savings, originally Megan's proposal, the savings, it was quite impressive. She was projecting, I think, close to a $600,000 savings. When we actually looked at it again, it was $50,000. And so I don't think that necessarily, while yes, $50,000 is a lot of money, I think in order to bring in an entire bus fleet and an entire new department, if you will, I don't know if the $50,000 savings is necessarily worth all of that, but that's something we can continue looking at. But we have met and we talked about it. We actually talked about it in our finance subcommittee meeting. We spent a lot of time looking at the data there as well, too.
Okay. Would you be willing to share that with the tri-board at least?
Sure.
The background? Okay.
Yep.
That would be great.
Yep.
There's another question here, again from Megan O'Connell. Has this tri-board committee ever discussed or set a target amount of savings, including savings from efficiencies, to be found and implemented over X years? I'll start. We haven't ever set an exact amount. We've just wanted to close the gap, but anyone else want to add to that? Okay.
Madam Chair, aren't we required to have a balanced budget, and therefore we're
Yeah.
posed with a problem last year and again this year, and that's the work that we're doing. So isn't the target to some degree
Yeah, that's
closing
true.
the gap?
That's true.
Yeah.
We haven't set an exact amount, but yes, that would be the goal. Since the override failed, we need to balance the budget. Thank you. I have another question here from Heather Fitzpatrick. Of the 60 pink slips, were some of those bus drivers that went to D?
I believe that the majority of the van drivers, I don't know the exact number, but I do believe that the majority of the van drivers were hired by D.
Okay.
I do believe so, yeah.
Okay, one more from Megan. The difference is based entirely on a different estimate on costs of new buses. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I
Well,
assume it's.
yeah, she's looking specifically at because we have shared it with her as well too, that information that we'll share
Okay.
with all of you, is that yes, there was, I do think that there were some assumptions that were made that when we looked at the data, it's just different numbers, and one of them being the cost of the actual buses. There was a significant difference there. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. There is another question here, but I don't know who this person is because they don't have their full name. So if this Scott S. could put in their full name, we'll get your question asked. In the meantime, let's continue on to the presentation of the efficiencies for FY25. Was that? Wasn't sure, Kristen. Yeah.
So we just have one slide here on where we are in the FY25 budget process. So for this fiscal year, just to give you a baseline, our free cash was certified on September 30th of this year. We have $5,653,000 in the general fund for free cash, and we have the other enterprise amounts that are listed on the screen there. $5 million for water enterprise, $800 for rec, $650,000 for ambulance, and $2.7 million for stormwater. So we did just have our special town meeting, and we had no financial articles there for the first time I can ever remember, so over 20 years. So we have all the free cash and retained earnings available heading into our annual town meeting. So that is basically our free cash balance going into this town meeting is higher than it was at the annual town meeting. So we're working on the tax rate recap process right now, and the Chief Assessor, Will Nazer, will be presenting at the Select Board on November 12th, and that's when the Select Board will set a tax rate or kick it to the next meeting with additional questions, but at some point in November, that tax rate will be set, and we'll be sending out bills. Just a reminder, we get this question every year. The bills that you pay for your property taxes on August 1st, November 1st are the preliminary bills, and then once the tax rate is set, you get the remaining balance of your tax bill for that year in February and May. So typically, the August and November bills are lower than the last two. And then, of course, we began the audit process from FY24. We did have the auditors on site the week of September 30th, and they'll probably be wrapping up the audit in the next 3 or 4 months. It's usually the time frame. we'll stop there if any questions on the process.
Danny, what was the date? What's the date for setting the tax rate? Again, is it?
November 12th is
Okay.
when Will is presenting.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, there's a clarification question on our last agenda item by Heather Fitzpatrick, and she's saying that wasn't my question. Was it 60 plus the bus drivers, or was it 60 including bus drivers?
Oh, it was 60 including.
Okay.
Thank you.
Answered.
But they did get jobs, which is good, so.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's keep going if nobody else has any other questions.
Great. So we wanted to give the tri-boards as well as members of the public where we are related to the efficiencies that we've laid out over the course of the past few months. This evening we'll not be talking about pay-as-you-throw. That will be on the select board agenda for November 12th. We'll give a very high-level overview. The review of the Road and Bush lease is ongoing. That continues to be an executive session, so we can't share too many details there. We do have some really exciting things to share about town and school energy efficiencies. The schools will be sharing some updates on their non-general fund account usages and balances. We'll be sharing some information on health insurance, regionalization for veterans, and economic development. Next slide, Dan. So in terms of solid waste and recycling, many of you are aware that we began the new contract with E.L. Harvey on July 1st of 2024. We also began limiting household volume about the September 1st timeframe. We let people kind of have the first few months to get used to the new system. There were changes to the bulk waste program. Anything over 50 pounds or bigger than a small chair are required to go to E.L. Harvey and pay them directly. That does not get into our waste stream. They can go directly to E.L. Harvey for white goods and bulk metal pickup. We have seen a significant decrease in our tonnage over the past 3 months. We've actually seen an 18% decrease year over year. So we're comparing our tonnage from July of 2024 to July of 2025, August and September, so on and so forth. So we're currently trying to get those numbers for October to see if that trend continues. Again, as I said in the previous slide, Mike Edwards will be giving a very substantial presentation on potential pay-as-you-throw options. We appreciate all the members of the public who participated in our survey that we ran over the past month. I think we had over 1,600 or 1,500 participants in that.
13 unique.
1,300 unique participants. So again, that was really helpful in us to prepare for what we're going to talk about next Tuesday. So next slide.
Kristen, just one thing before you go on to solid waste. We have a question in the chat. It's from Shayna Farnsworth. So, will there be a final decision on pay-as-you-throw at the November 12th meeting? This analysis and conversation has been going on for quite some time without resolution.
So no, there will not be a final decision. We feel that we want to present the select board with the survey data and several options, and then we feel we can move forward after that. So there has not been a substantial presentation of the select board based upon the data that we currently have now under the contract that we currently have now.
Okay. Thanks.
That's a pretty big drop, right?
It is.
15%. Do we know what's that's translating into dollars? Do you have that number?
Projected over the year about 130,000,
Wow.
but again, it's only 3 months worth of data, so.
Do you attribute that to the changes up the top, or call into question previous tonnage?
I think it's probably a little too early to say. I think we need a few more months of data. We haven't seen it show up in any other waste streams. Even just looking at the bulk pickups, it's, it'd be about a couch a day per family, that the tonnage we've seen. So it's not likely that it's moved into the E.L. Harvey side of the stream. We don't see any of that revenue. It hadn't shown up in the recycling, so that's why we're kind of cautious about, we want to see several more months of data to know for sure if we don't know where it's gone. It's about 100 tons a month. Good for us.
Got to think about that one.
Anything else on solid waste?
There is a question about the enterprise funds.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to go back to that
We
slide.
could
or
go
if
back to
it's-
that. Yeah, I
Okay.
was going to wait, but that's fine. So Shayna Farnsworth is asking about the enterprise fund balances. So some of the balances in the enterprise fund seem very high. How is that money used? What can it be used for? Why are the balances so high, especially in rec enterprise?
So for rec enterprise, I'll address that. We are using some of that money to offset the operating budget. So going into the proposed budget for next year actually does not have a subsidy at this point. So we're using that to fund the rec enterprise. So if that's the goal, is not to have them use any general fund revenue. So
This is my question. So will the rec enterprise be used for any capital requests from recreation?
there was a vehicle request out there, so if, that's a potential use for it. So it depends on the final plan, I guess, but it could be a available source for that.
Okay.
Dan, can you talk about our policies to have certain percentages of our balance be in free cash or in the enterprise and reserves?
Yeah, so it's actually, we want at least 5% of our general fund operating budget in our reserves, so free cash or stabilization fund. So at the end of the year, we want to make sure that that balance isn't drawn down so far that we don't have reserves heading into the next year. That could hurt us on our bond rating and put us in a tough spot if something unforeseen comes up that we need to address right away. For the enterprise, those funds can only be spent on those specific enterprises. So for water, they're building treatment plants. They could use some of those funds to pay for capital and whatnot. For ambulance, they typically use their funds to pay for, there's a capital request for new heart monitors coming up for $171,000. And they do purchase a new ambulance every 3 to 4 years, which is about $540,000. So we do need to maintain some balance there. Then stormwater, there's a major project coming up through capital as well for culvert replacement to the tune of $1.6 million. So that will be used towards that project.
What was that number, Dan?
$1.6 million.
But those don't have like a percentage target like free cash does?
No, not really. It's, we want to have some retained earnings there just to pay for the expenses related, but the stormwater enterprise is subsidized by $600,000 from the general fund, and that was in the policy since that wasn't enacted. And then the ambulance does have a subsidy to it too. It's in the $600,000. It's actually in the $700,000 range this year, but it's blended in with the rest of the firefighter activities, so it's really offsetting the entire fire department.
Okay, I'm going to go back and just clear up a couple of these other ones. So Scott Smiter is asking, has anyone attempted zero-based budgeting?
So no, Westford has not traditionally done zero-based budgeting.
Okay. Shayna Farnsworth is asking, when can the public expect an update on the Road and Bush lease?
So I'll go through that in a future slide.
Okay. And, okay, this is on free cash. So Christy Bates is asking, is free cash the stabilization fund? If not, what is the amount in the stabilization fund?
So, no, it's not the stabilization fund. There's over $5 million in the stabilization fund. It's 5.6 or 5.7 million at this point. So our reserves are those two added together. However, we do use the free cash to fund our capital plan, any necessary supplements at the annual town meeting, our snow and ice deficit, and our perchlorate allocation each year. So that 5.6 million free cash will be drawn down.
Okay, but the stabilization fund isn't listed here,
Nope.
correct?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, let's keep going, because I think some of these are going to come up later, and if not, we'll come back to them.
So the select board is still under review of the Road and Bush lease. We started negotiations with TRCCI in March of 2024. They are done in executive session due to the financial nature of them. So I don't have a timeline where this information will be public, but I can tell you that there is an executive session with the select board on Tuesday evening for further discussion. Also wanted to let members of the public know that we began our space needs assessment or analysis that includes the 3 Road and Bush buildings, the town hall, police station, DPW garage, water department, and some other ancillary buildings in June of 2024 to help inform us in that as well. And we continue to make good progress on that with our architect Tecton, and we will be having some public forums in the January timeframe for members of the public to understand what's going on for that space analysis. So I will turn this over to Mike, and Dr. Chu and Jenny can certainly chime in related to the town and school energy efficiencies. I just do want to touch upon the IGA, so the investment grade audit. This was something that was brought to the town several years ago, a plan to review all of our buildings in terms of the base energy usage and then several projects that could come out of that. We did receive a document from Amoresco. It went back and forth between the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, our consultant Beth Greenblatt, back to Amoresco, and has been going back and forth. And we're really not at a point where we're entirely happy with the plan. However, Mike Edwards and Jeff Goodwin and the school department have proceeded forward with some of the projects that were recommended in the IGA without Amoresco. So I'm excited for Mike to share some of these wins that we're going forward with. And we're also using NIMCOG, the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, our regional planning agency, to help us with some of our sustainability efforts as well. So Mike, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So first, probably just to follow up on the NIMCOG effort that we have, we're using them really to supplement some of the efforts that our former sustainability coordinator was doing, so the Green Communities reporting, as well as what we think is a very important effort, and that's working with the Select Board and the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee to really help us get some very clear goals for the next couple of years. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks with a workshop starting on the 12th. So we'll see some more information from that kind of blend into the strategic plan effort. We just wrapped up 3 major weatherization projects, all of which were identified in the IGA, and that's the Westford Academy work, Rita Miller and Police Department. All of those are projected to generate some substantial savings on energy costs, and we should be closing those grants and rebates out shortly. Those were, with the exception of the Police Department, Westford Academy and Rita Miller were 100% covered with either rebates or grants. And the Police Department was a little under halfway covered. We did have some capital on that one as well. We did just, well, we're finalizing contracts right now for 2 major lighting projects, Westford Academy and Rita Miller also. Westford Academy, we're doing just a phase 1, but those were both projects that were identified in the IGA. In total, we've got about $530,000 worth of work being done on both. They're going to generate immediate savings in the fact that we're leveraging some very good incentives that were very short-term and came up as really good opportunities to jump on. We've also taken advantage of another incentive program through National Grid where we're financing the work through on-bill repayment. So the balance of that will be on bill repayment over 5 years at 0% interest. So we haven't done that before. That's new. It's a program that's been around for a little while. We haven't taken advantage of it, but it's a very good opportunity. And actually, that winds up being cash flow positive for us right out of the gate. So we wind up with about $7,000 positive cash after servicing that repayment. We're going to be looking at that program and using it more and having to move fairly quick to take advantage of these promotional incentives. About half of that project cost on both buildings is paid for with rebates that were promotional. We've got about 6 months to go through start to finish, get everything done from contract to completion. So we haven't done anything quite that large. It's going to be it's moving very, very quickly. We anticipate we're going to be doing more projects like that.
Mike, I just have a question on that. So with those projects, what's the procurement procedure there?
We're using 25A, Chapter 25A, Section 14, which is
the one that's with the IGA?
No, that's a different 25A,
Oh.
that performance contracting. This is actually a procurement method that lets us do up to $300,000 with essentially a subcontractor under National Grid. So we work directly with their vendor. We've used that program on 2 other projects in the past. It's just a good way for us to save a lot of time to work with the vendor directly, and it's really the only way we can do some of these projects that are promotional incentives. So these National Grid will offer promotional incentives periodically that have typically very high rates. In the case of the lighting projects, 50%. Mm-hmm. The next projects I'm talking about are ones we're trying to put together right now. So we had about a dozen buildings identified in the IGA to do weatherization work. That's one of your low-hanging fruit type projects. We did 2 of those with Westford Academy, well, 3 of them, Westford Academy, Rita Miller, and Police. We're picking up all the rest of them, we hope. We're working through the incentive process. We were able to negotiate with National Grid to kind of take advantage of some incentives that had expired. Just out of luck, really. They were great to work with on this, and we're hoping to be about 75% incentive on those. We believe we can absorb the rest with existing budgets that we have, so we're expecting it to be budget neutral. But we're in the process of that. That'll be another fast one. So between all of these projects, we're going to be about $750,000 worth of work, and we're hoping to be out of pocket somewhere around $80,000.
Okay.
So very, very good opportunities if we can make them work. I think it's a good example of if we're able to be pretty nimble and jump on these things and use some of the tools that are out there, we should be able to do more of these in the future. And that's one of the good reasons that we've got the IGA to help us identify those buildings, but it's a different way to procure some of those projects and make them happen without having to pay, some of the overhead or the additional costs you have with the IGA. Plus, it lets us bite off smaller pieces, lessen our risk a little bit.
Thank you.
Question?
Is any of this savings coming from the Inflation Reduction Act's direct pay for municipalities, or are they not qualified for
No,
that?
I'll let Dan speak a little bit to that, but we are taking advantage of the direct pay on, none of these qualify directly,
Okay.
But we're using direct pay on vehicle incentives. Dan's gotten really good at doing tax returns for government, which is new.
I haven't done tax returns in 25 years, so yeah, that was new. But
Maybe clarify that for the record, for the town.
for the town, yes.
Mike, would you explain to everybody, Jeff did a nice job coming to the school committee and talking about specifically why the lighting projects were taking place at Westford Academy and Rita Miller, since we have 9 schools, why just 2?
Well,
could you just talk about that for a second?
Those 2 in particular we picked mostly because we'd already had the audits completed on them by this vendor. So it saved us a lot of time. We were able to jump on incentives really before they ran out. And given the scope of the work, we also are kind of limited by how much we can do at any given time. Plus Westford Academy, being as large as it is, makes absolutely the most sense to do on those 2 buildings. The biggest reason was really bandwidth on those. Plus, we were also looking at we wanted to experiment with this on-bill repayment and make sure it actually works for us.
Thanks.
That just needs to be reset, like, no out-of-pocket costs and savings.
Yes.
Like, I just want to say that again.
Yeah, no, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
look,
it's
on
just
the
great.
lighting ones in particular, we're taking advantage of a procurement method we really haven't used a whole lot. We're taking advantage of promotional incentives that we had to move very quickly to get that expire very quick. We're taking advantage of this on-bill repayment that we haven't used. And again, 0% financing is fantastic. And just because of the nature of the projects, these are ones that save right out of the gate because it's a really simple calculation. You're talking wattage. So we feel really comfortable that the numbers we have on the savings are very reliable, not like necessarily some other types of projects that have a lot more variables in operating time, et cetera. So we felt these were safe to kind of experiment a little bit. But, the probably one of the biggest takeaways we've had with doing these energy projects is we need to figure out how to be very quick with these because these promotional incentives will typically come up at year end. They're difficult for local government to do because we can't work that quick. So trying to find things we can do without necessarily having to wait for town meeting for an appropriation, that's a big deal in our structure. So we're trying to be creative and we're trying to find new tools that we haven't used before. We're looking at a few other things, and my goal with the IGA is really, one, we're not throwing the idea out. There may be opportunities there, but we also don't want to wait. We're going to go ahead and just keep chunking away at these things and biting off pieces we can chew, trying to do things budget neutral, and we'll recover savings. Some of them will have paybacks of a few years, some of them paybacks will be immediate. So we're trying to be very choosy with what we do and really take things that we can handle in our capacity from a facility standpoint, But no, we're tickled about the lighting projects. They're going to be good because, I mean, concept to completion inside of 6 months. We don't anticipate any impact to school programming. Should be able to do them all during vacations, we're keeping our fingers crossed that it works out well. And if it does, we're going to do more of it.
Great. Is there an estimated savings on the weatherization projects?
Not 100% right now, but what I've got so far is
Tougher to kind of.
the 5 that we got done. We're still auditing buildings right now.
Okay.
Those audits are being done. We're still developing. We've only got the application submitted for 2 of them. We've got estimates of about $15,000 a year on the 5 buildings that we have. We've got
Savings, 15,000 savings?
savings.
And is that above and beyond any cost? Or
That's-
that would be,
Well, we're looking, like I said, at having some out of pocket for that. We're going to.
that was the 80,000?
That was, there's going to be a portion that's going to come out of the school's operating budget. We're taking it initially out of their electrical accounts because we have had some savings from some other projects in the past. I don't know, and I probably won't know until late Tuesday afternoon, exactly what the amount that the town is going to have to contribute for the town site. It will certainly be less than that, but we've got an ARPA request to fund that. And, you know, I'm putting in for 50. I think we'll need significantly less than that. And, you know, that'll be the ARPA money, so obviously the payback is immediate on that. But we'll have, hopefully by the end of the day Tuesday, once they get me all the rest of the estimates and we've got some incentive letters in hand, you know, we're looking, even if we don't assume the ARPA money's not our money, it's a payback under 5 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris, quick question. The reference you made to IGA, is that an acronym? for-
Yeah, I'm sorry, the investment grade audit. So, like Kristen said, several years ago, the town engaged with Amoresco, which is a performance contracting firm. They basically come in, are you familiar enough with that? So they come in, they do the audit, they package up all these projects, they give you a gigantic package of stuff, and you can do it theoretically with paying back with the energy savings that you have. You bond the project. But the IGA, like Kristen said, still needs a little bit of work, but the document itself does give us a good baseline for understanding what our buildings are, what our building electrical usage is, what the gas usage is, and where the savings opportunity are. So we're kind of spinning off the little mini projects out of that and just doing them.
So what is it? Is this their audit? They provide you with an assessment of what the needs are, and then you
Yes,
operate off it? Okay.
yes, and just packages of savings across a bunch of different things based on the parameters we set initially a few years back. So we looked at certain buildings. You know, one of the big pieces when it first started was looking at a lot of solar. Of course, that led to the need for a lot of solar-ready roofs that we don't have. You know, just the majority of the work coming out of it was lighting, weatherization work, transformer replacements, building management systems, probably the biggest one, and I think is probably our biggest single capital need that we have out there. So,
Thank you.
I think that it should be said that doing these small projects now is going to reduce that bonded capital request down the road.
Oh, 100%.
Basically, so.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very,
yeah, and it's, you know, I think one of the benefits of doing it this way is, you know, we've got some other things that we're looking at. We're not ready to kind of get too into those right now, but as we do these, they free up operating costs to fund more of these. And if we can also figure out a good way to spend those savings into further investment, power's not getting any cheaper, and this will let us just kind of, once this really starts the wheel moving on these things, and if we can keep it going, it's just going to let us do more and more in terms of energy reduction and cost savings. So, more to come.
Anybody else? Do you have more on this, or did we finish the?
I could go all night.
Finish this tonight? Okay. Why don't we
Okay,
keep- Yeah.
so before we talk about the policy work and the guidebook that we're creating for the revolving accounts, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of our upcoming special education programming changes that we'll be proposing. First of all, in FY '25, For this year, we did create the Roots program, which is supporting our 18 to 22-year-old students who would otherwise be having to receive out-of-district services for their support for those years. We've been looking to see, are there other ways that we can impact our programming to decrease potential future out-of-district placements. And so we have two specific programs that we're looking at that we're hoping to be able to establish for FY26. First of all, right now we have a medically fragile program that's currently at the Miller School that supports our K-2 population, and it ends there. So we have students who they're supported at the Miller School, but then because of their needs, we're not having a medically fragile program at another one of our 3 to 5 schools. We have no option but to recommend that they have an out-of-district placement. And so this is the first thing we want to look at is actually establishing a medically fragile program at one of our elementary schools so that we can keep those students with us and keep them in district, which would be an incredible savings for us moving forward. I don't have a number for that specifically because it's about trying to figure out what those out-of-district placements would cost in the future. So it wouldn't be saving us money that we're spending right now, but it would be preventing us from needing to pay that higher amount later. And additionally, we've established a new social emotional program at one of our 3 to 5 schools called the SAIL program, which is a unique program that we have as well. We have a number of programs in the district that we've had for a long time. We've had an autism program throughout that's gone, K to 12 that's been very successful. We've had different life skills programs that have been very successful. These are new programs, or well, the SAIL program, which is the social emotional program at the 3 to 5 level, is something that was just established in the last couple of years. And while we have supports at the middle schools, we don't have this specific support. So we're looking to see, okay, as these students are getting older and getting ready to transition to another building, if we establish programs at these next buildings, that allows us to continue to support these students. So those are two things that we're looking at for FY26 that I just wanted you to all have on your radar. So we're talking about it. We'll be talking about it with the school committee more specifically, and we'll share what the impacts that those have on our budget as we develop that.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
I just want to make a note that it's a delicate balance to talk about this as an efficiency, because these are individuals and students, and obviously it is best practice to keep people in your own community, right? So it's best practice, and there also might be some savings because we know out-of-district placements can be so expensive.
Yeah, we very much want them to be able to stay with us in the district, which is the goal. Thank you very much for saying that. So then, did you have some? Sorry.
Go ahead, Nate.
I was just going to ask if on the 18 to 22-year-old population, if the district has considered at all the MACI program, which is the Massachusetts Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment for partnerships between local schools and public higher education institutions. And it comes with funding to be able to support that if you're doing in-district for those students.
That would be an excellent question for us to ask the administrator who is overseeing that program. And I will ask that question. I don't know the answer to that. Thank you for asking that.
I actually had a question on some of these. During the budget meetings from last year, we had talked about potentially bringing students from other districts into, let's say, like the Roots program. Number one, has anything come of that? But also, with the new programs, do you foresee being able to bring students from other districts in?
You would be able to.
Okay.
Yes, you would. We for the medically fragile program, we would be able to do that if someone from another district thought that our SAIL program would benefit their student versus another. Because for them, it's still an out-of-district placement. So every district wants to keep the students in their district, right? But
it might be closer or
that's
something.
Right. We've seen that.
You know?
We've seen that where we've had neighboring districts where we have a program that they benefit from.
Hard of hearing one,
And-
right?
Right.
Is an example.
What's that?
Our hard
Thank
of
you.
hearing program is an example of that.
Yeah. We currently, the students who are all participating in the Roots program are all Westford students. But yes, we know that is something that could happen, and it could with the others as well too.
I think it's important to note that the first year of the Roots program was never targeted to bring in
Right.
outside. It was establish it, and then, if there's capacity, we would essentially.
And we had
offer it
we had a
up.
cohort of students who were ready
Yeah.
and who were transitioning at that moment in time, and so we've been successful in supporting them. It's been fantastic.
How many of those students are in-house in the Roots program? Because at the time you weren't sure.
Right.
How many
So
of them?
we're going to be talking about that at the Tuesday night school committee meeting. I believe right now there's 6 students who are registered and enrolled in the program.
Okay.
There were well, originally we had talked that we thought that there could be 8.
Uh-huh.
There was 7, and I don't remember if there ever were 8 that actually enrolled. I'd have to go back and look, but I do know that one of the students did transition out of the program. But it's going well.
Okay, great. Any other questions on this? Nope. Okay.
So, in addition to the revolving accounts that we're about to talk about, the other thing we wanted to mention was that as part of our action items for this year with our strategic plan, we have established a space utilization working group as well too, because the work that we've done with our feasibility study, and then the work that led to the MSBA work with Robinson. A question was asked about, well, when was the last time we've done a space utilization of all the buildings and how the buildings are being used? So we're working closely with all the principals this year to collect all of that data to make sure that we're able to use everything as efficiently as possible and to look to see how things are being used versus the way that they might have been used in the past. And with that, I would love to kick it over to Valerie.
So our finance subcommittee has really been driving this work, and when I shared it with the school committee, I wanted to orient everybody about which pocket of money we're talking about because the public schools is funded through a variety of different mechanisms, which you can see here. So what we're talking about here is in that light blue revolving accounts, and that's a total amount there for 2.4 million. That includes a variety of different accounts. Similar to enterprise, it's basically things that come in for a fee, like riding the bus. Bus pass goes into a separate account to keep it all straight. And then those things that can be used for those specific services and programs. And while we've been talking about this and having sort of a more in-depth review through the finance subcommittee, looking at our fees, looking at the offsets for these types of accounts. You can go to the next one.
Actually, stay there for just 1 second, because I was just going to say, again, as we're looking at this, I think it's helpful for people to see that the light blue is primarily what we're going to be talking about. The green, though, the school choice, those 2 colors there, or those 2 sections, those are the ones that we have autonomy over, right? The grants, we apply for the grants, we get the grants, we're told exactly how we're supposed to spend the grants. And circuit breaker, for people who aren't aware, that's what comes to us from the state to support our special education costs. And we get, depending on how much money we spend in special education, then the state reimburses a certain amount. And then that has to be used within a certain time frame. So what the best practice has been is utilizing the circuit breaker that you receive for the next budget cycle. So you receive it in the fall, like we just received our FY25 monies in circuit breaker, and we will include that as we develop the FY26 budget. And the numbers that, it's in small print there, but when Valerie created this, she was using FY24 numbers just because at that time those were all now closed out, and we were able to actually talk about them in their entirety.
So what I was going to say was the finance subcommittee has been slowly doing fee reviews of a lot of these areas, but this is the first time that we're really making a push to create a work product and a document. And you can go to the next, oh great, thank you. So our sort of vision for this that we've been talking about is something that the school committee and the finance subcommittee would start their review every year in the fall, check in on these accounts and make recommendations, kind of have a target balance that then if we're above that balance, administration would propose a plan for how to address that. You don't have to read every word here, but we're trying to make this digestible for the public of what exactly we're looking at here, because sometimes terms get thrown around like reserve or revolving accounts or school choice. So this is hopefully going to be one place that would be published in January timeframe along with our budget documents for example, our esteemed finance committee or a member of the public to go to one place and see what exactly is in all of these accounts, how can they be used, and has the school committee addressed this?
And and like you said, you already shared this with the school committee in the draft form, and our goal is that it's going to be finalized
End of this month.
for November 25th.
So, like I said, creating this out of thin air has been a lot of work. We're working on this draft document, and it might be anticlimactic because you'll see that FY26 usage is TBD, right? Like as part of the budget process, a lot of this will still be part of Dr. Chu's presentation in December, but the conversations happening now are about what kind of balances we want to have here, and the school committee themselves and the finance subcommittee just haven't finalized that in time for this meeting, but it's probably on our agenda for November 25th.
Working on it.
So I did put a couple examples in here just so you could, so this is like a kind of cover page. If you want to go to the next slide, I forget which one I used, food service. So this is the kind of information you would see for each account, and there's 15 or so of them. Like a purpose, what are some user fees, what are the types of revenue we expect from each one, what are the type of expenses, if there's any MGLs that are referenced or policies. Sorry, I know it's small, it wouldn't be readable here,
Thanks,
but
Al. Thank you.
and then really the meat of it that is driving our discussions is what are the expectations for usage of these accounts? Some of them it does make sense. Some of our conversations have revolved around, well, it does make sense for busing, for example, to have a yearly amount in there, like as working capital, that you took in these fees and that stays and then gets used for the following year. But a lot of them may not apply to that situation also. So that's kind of what we're trying to drive to those discussions. And then we would have.
Well, this is a good example, because, and that's when we talked about it, that the DESI suggests to have 3 months worth of expenses in your food service account. So that's our target and our
Yep.
goal.
Yep. And then below each one would have, below like the narrative would have three closeouts balances, an expense and a revenue of the previous year, and then the sort of the current year numbers that were used to create the budget. This is actually an old screenshot. If you go to the next one of the things we've had a lot of conversations about is how do you make this, if you want to go to the next one. I don't know who's driving. Oh, sorry, these are both, go one more.
They all have expected.
Preschool. So what I was trying to point out was a lot of our conversations have included like how do you make this readable for someone who is not on finance committee year after year looking at this document. So things as simple as values in parentheses here are actually a credit, and values without parentheses indicate a debit. And so we're trying to put notes like that to try to educate the public along with, as they pick up this document, with how to read it. Back and forth was 2 more examples, the building usage and the integrated preschool. And again, there's 15 or so of these that we'll be doing. Each one will have a page like this. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
So it relates to these, but I'm not sure where exactly it fits. In some of these, there are fees that are collected, right? Like, let's say the bus fee or preschool, whatever. When you're looking at the fees and figuring out how to set the fees, where is the work, or when do you figure out how much a particular service or whatever it is costs you, so you know whether your fee is covering, and you may decide that it's not going to cover the whole thing, but
Yeah.
you know what that's covering.
So those fee review conversations happened a little bit more last year. our conversations right now are more about the target balance
Yeah,
and what
okay.
kind of information to put out. But over the last 2 years, I would say we dove into like the early arrival fee, athletics,
Bus fee.
The bus fee.
early music, elementary music fee. So each one of those got a different, a separate analysis that wouldn't show up in a document like this, but Finance Subcommittee has been doing that.
And what we did is we looked at what was coming in, what were the expenses, and what were the comps with our, that we used in the
Benchmarking, yeah.
budget task force,
Yeah,
the
right.
similar thing to say, how are we in comparison to other communities with these fees? So those are the different ways that we look at it.
And some of that discussion has also been, recognizing that a fee may not cover the full expense, but not necessarily being able to increase that fee fully because it would be such a shock of a increase.
Sure. And-
Right?
and-
So it's,
And that's fine. There may be cases where we're not going to cover the entire cost, but it would be nice to know that
Yep.
because
Yeah.
there's other places where I'd want to cover the full cost.
That's right.
Yeah. And
I wouldn't be willing to subsidize it,
I oversimplified by saying it's sort of separate to this conversation because I do think it's playing into that when we talk about what is the right balance, right?
Yeah.
We do want to make sure that for some of these, like what's coming in matches what's going out and matching that offset. So it is related.
When we started the subcommittee a few years ago, the main driving thing was this regular review of the fees. Before we started talking, and this came from conversations with the FinCom last year and conversations that they had at the school committee about wanting to have this specific policy and books in place. But the fee review had started before that, and one of the things we had talked about was, at the time, we thought it was really important to be looking at the fees outside of the budget cycle because you should be looking at them for their own and not as a response to a budget. And so that's what we started doing. And then, of course, with the concerns that we had, then we're like, well, we need to also do both, right? So now we also need to say, if we do have budget concerns, do we need to address fees that we might not have addressed otherwise?
Right.
So we've been doing that as well.
one more comment on the draft document. We've had a lot of discussion also about the expected balance or appropriate balance, however we phrase it. We are likely to come out of this with some of these numbers, some of the current balances being potentially significantly higher than what's deemed to be what we really want to be carrying in there. And, it's going to be coming up with the responsible way to bring that back in line and not just a one-time, offset, because then we're just kicking that
So
ball down
Do you
the
want to
road.
talk a little bit
I was
about-
going to say, yes, so with the targets as we're setting them, Jenny's done a really nice job looking at, okay, well, with the balance that's in there right now, how many years would you be able to increase that, depending on what you think that increase should be, and before you either exhaust that, right? And so we did that both going to zero and then also at where the targets are. When if there's and some we've decided, okay, there shouldn't be a carryover, right? But some we're saying, well, there should be an expected balance, and so what would we do there so that, and Jenny's looked at it to say, okay, well, you could do this for 5 years, you could do this for 6 years, this for 4 years. And so while we haven't presented what our recommendations are to the school committee yet, that's something we've been looking at to say, okay, well, let's look to see how can we increase this offset and what is sustainable for this amount of time, knowing that there is an end.
Yeah.
So it is something that but it would give us time to
Sure.
to plan for that, and/or based on looking at what future budget environments are like.
No, that's great. I mean, that gives you a little bit of a runway to kind of figure out what to do in the meantime.
But that's part of it, and that's what we want to share with the school committee, is to actually say, this projection should take, you could do this for 5 years. And I think then they'll have information that they can make a decision with.
Okay. Any other, Dennis?
Just, this is a good subject, and it is a follow-up from the our last year's discussions. I guess, a question I have you, I would assume that there's some sort of a fiduciary responsibility to keep the money in these particular accounts, and I can understand that. But I think what I was going to ask you, and what relates back to, I think, the issue and discussion from last year, is two questions. One of them is if some of the accounts are depleted while others aren't being drained down, right? would you have a policy that would allow for the transfer of the funds to those particular accounts if they're, like, one's moving down faster than expected, so to speak? And then I think the critical question is that, is this 15 accounts going on? If, I think, as I recall last year, I think it was the music account, I'm just recollection, there was a considerable amount of money still left in that the idea was to get a mechanism to bring it back into your operating budget if some point, if it was staying stagnant for a certain amount of time. Has that been addressed in this process?
So all of those things are being looked at.
Okay.
Some of them you can't transfer things. There are some things that you would be able to do that, but some of them you can't,
I
like,
figured
because
that.
some of them have very, very specific usages,
Yeah.
and so you wouldn't be able to use it to then help another account. But you could just look to see, do you readjust those offsets? But I think you will see that when this work is all done, and when you're looking at our FY26 budget, you're going to see how this is all played out, and you'll see the thought that goes into how any of these accounts are used. Because, like Valerie said, I mean, there's a wide variety of them, and we've already identified some that we're like, there really shouldn't be any carryover here. This specific thing, really, what you brought in should just be spent, and that's just something you should figure out. Whereas there are others that it is appropriate to keep something in there. So I think when that's all done, it'll be clear.
I mean, a very interesting presentation. I'll be waiting for it.
Right?
And some of those decisions aren't purely financial either, right? Like,
Understood.
It's a district value to offer elementary music instruction.
Right.
So you want to have some amount so that if all of a sudden participation dropped and you couldn't cover that salary, my take would be, I want to offer that for another year to see if that was a fluke, right? Or to, like, keep that program going. So those are the types of conversations we're having that aren't just, oh, here's money, I want to drain it. Let's talk about what the implications of that are and what the values as a district we have.
And one other thing that I would note in some of our discussions was that some of these higher balances that grew in one particular year, if we look back, we can see that it was a decision that was made to use one-time funds as opposed to using those offsets. So those balances kind of got out of whack. So,
Yeah.
we want to make sure we don't do just the opposite.
That's good.
In case it's not obvious, Tom and I work together on the finance subcommittee with Bill. So we've been looking at this document for months.
A lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, Mr. Edwards just kind of walked us through a transaction where there were some capital improvements that were sort of financed through I guess, payable instead of kind of a debt instrument. And so I'm curious where on something like this that would show up, because if we spent, I think the number I wrote down was $750,000 for kind of $80,000 up front. Like, is there a balance sheet component that's missing to this, or is that full $750 show up on here and then the cash comes in from the financing?
Are you talking specifically about the project I referenced? or-
Yeah, where there's effectively a loan or leverage applied to a capital
That's
project.
actually interesting, and Dan and I were talking about this today, because let's just take the lighting example. There's not really a transaction that occurs on our end for that, so we're actually trying to figure out, okay, the entire transaction occurs between the subcontractor and the utility to do over $500,000 worth of work. So we're actually going to have this conversation with the auditors to understand, does this have a fixed asset component to it? Is there some other, do we need to capture that work? Quite frankly, we don't know the answer to that yet, but it doesn't show up as debt. It shows up essentially as a component of our utility bill. So it hits our operating account, but it's not debt. It is essentially a electricity payment offset by the savings.
Is there any circumstance where we're on the hook for the liability that's related to the work that has been done, where we would have to pay it without?
Yes, I mean, there is risk, and that's why we're doing just these as a pilot to see how it works. In this particular case, we feel the risk is virtually nothing, because we're talking about lighting. We know exactly what's going to happen in terms of the wattage reduction and the corresponding kilowatt hour reduction. But We'll look at that to see kind of how it goes. We were able to get an extension on the timeline, so really the only real risk for us is not completing the work in time to receive the incentive. But we've got 6 months to do roughly 4 or 5 weeks worth of work.
And I believe the town did something similar a number of years ago, probably 10-plus years ago, with the phone lines. They did a review and brought a contractor in, and they did it. Basically, the contract was paid out of the savings.
But the question of kind of how it hits the balance sheet, we're working on figuring that one out.
Yeah, whether that affects debt capacity or.
Yeah, because
that kind of
we
thing.
really don't have, we'll have a contract, but we won't have an expenditure associated with this other than, 5 years of a monthly payment on an energy bill under a utility account. So it's an interesting question, and we're trying to work through how exactly that works, especially if it does wind up being something that's considered a fixed asset improvement, et cetera.
Yeah.
So.
I must imagine we're not the only of the 351
Oh, no.
municipalities
No.
taking advantage of this with
No.
no challenge, right?
Nope, this is just the first time we're doing it. We know it works, so we're going to figure out how to make it work.
How other towns
It's
do
an
it.
opportunity for us to try something we haven't done without coming to the taxpayers.
We have a couple of questions and comments that I think might fit well here. So Shayna Farnsworth said, "Thank you to the school committee for doing a deeper dive on their free cash / revolving fund and for a policy on where to keep balances and what to do with the monies. The other enterprise funds should be required by the SB, Select Board, or Town Manager to do the same. It provides transparency, and having policies around this money will be helpful."
Can I just respond to that?
Sure.
So the school department does not have free cash. I just want to be clear. The town of Westford overall has free cash. Dan showed that balance. He also explained that it's usually a 5% of our annual operating budget. So we do have that. And then within our enterprise funds for recreation, water, ambulance, and stormwater, we do keep an eye on those and have certain checks and balances on them. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else on that, Dan.
Yeah, they're under a separate legislation that it's also like a business-like activity within the operating budgets, like with the water enterprise. We can't take those funds and go and pay for other things that aren't water-related. We do charge them direct and indirect costs, so like a portion of administrative salaries and whatnot. We apply all the costs and benefits for the water employees to that enterprise, but we can't take their funds and go use it to fund something different. It's just not allowed.
Sure, yeah. I think just one other comment that I have in relation to this is I think I sort of agree with Shayna in the sense that it's nice to see this spelled out for all of the different funds and to see where the balances may carry from one year to the next. We don't and obviously I understand the enterprise funds can't be moved around. But with the recreation enterprise kind of growing, like I think it's grown quite a bit in the last year.
Yeah.
It might be nice to do a little bit of a look on what are we going to do with that? What is the rec enterprise going to do with that money? Are they going to draw it down? Are they going to, where's it going?
Yeah, they'll all be part of the budget, because
Yep.
we have to explain those, but
Yep.
all this information is reported in town report each year. Just go to the town accountants section, and you can see the whole history there from years going back.
Okay. There's a couple of other comments sort of related to this. Christy Bates says, will the town revolving funds use this format as well? And I think for those she's talking about, there's a whole bunch of those smaller.
Yeah, they're much smaller in size, but we have been using some of those funds to offset the budget as well. We did that last year. We're looking at that again this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, we will take a look at those and make recommendations.
Okay, and then Heather Fitzpatrick is saying the town should create policies on their revolving funds and other funds. She's thinking of the flu clinic and some of the others. Just some comments there.
Those are also governed under our bylaw that have a specific revenue source
Yeah.
and a specific expenditure amount for them
Yeah.
too. So we're somewhat limited in what we can do, but
Sure.
we use that to buy flu vaccines and to pay for hours for our nurse as well. So
But I guess in the same vein, these accounts have similar restrictions and limits.
We could use their template
Yeah, you
and
could use
fill
the
it
same
in how we
template.
could. and then
It might be
provide
kind of
that.
nice to
We can try our
do
best
that.
to do that.
Yeah.
Could kind of be like a nutrition facts for our.
That is, yeah, that's kind of what it is. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. There was
Well, it's just interesting to add that, like, especially if this expands, we've tried to be very thoughtful about what steps are we adding each year, right? So that's why that we had that whole discussion about, like, do you use the accounting notation, or do you transfer it into like positive and negatives? We want it to be as easy as possible to update every year. So our current proposal is to keep with the accounting notation and just add those like a legend everywhere to remind people what you're looking at. But I don't want to add a step that the business office has to do every year to this extra document, right? So,
Yeah, no, I appreciate
so
that.
likewise for, we can always collaborate if there's something that works better.
I think I'm going to wait on a couple of these until we're done with the efficiencies. And Heather, I'm sorry if you're out there listening. I'm not entirely sure what your last.
I know what that one is.
Do you know what that is? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So we've heard a question about, so like I was saying, some of them does make sense to draw down, some of them may not be, and some of them are a policy discussion. One of the ones that we recently talked about in a subcommittee that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to hold on to a carryover balance is our 5th grade camp program. For those of you who don't know, all the 5th graders from 3 schools spend like 2.5 days in East Boston camps. They have a donation participation fee attached to that. It covers the expenses of the 3 days, as well as a coordinator stipend. And we talked about, like, well, let's encourage usage so that stays sort of as what comes in goes out, except do you hold on to the stipend fee or not? And the follow-up question I've heard from the public was, well, doesn't that apply to the bus fee? Or like, why is that different? And I would say that we're still talking about that as a committee, but my first instinct is that the 5th grade camp is a stipend, whereas a lot of these other things are elementary instrumental music is salaries. So to me, that's different, right? We're looking for a stipend position, longevity and sustainability versus salary.
And comparing that to the bus, right? Like, we know what that cost is, right? We know what the cost is. And so you have to pay for a lot more than just even a salary with that. And the conversation that we had about the 5th grade camp specifically was we've dedicated this specific stipend so that one individual could go above and beyond to organize this. And if there is no funding other than that, it would just impact what type of camp is it, right? Like, what type of activities do the students, would they be participating in? But that was something we talked about, that it wouldn't necessarily mean that it couldn't happen. It just might mean they might not be able to do as many fun things, but we were saying that the important thing in order to, what would need to take place in order to guarantee that it could happen for one more season? And we said, making sure that you have the stipend to pay someone to organize the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think, I recall the conversation last year. I think you made a pretty compelling case about the need to support the school buses. I think that was pretty clear. But I think what came up in the discussion was that, and I certainly agree with you that, if people are contributing money, then they should be able to expect that that's where it's going to go.
Right.
But as I recall, there was a period of time that on some of the accounts, the money had not been used and had accumulated over a certain period of time, and you really couldn't get to it. You know what I mean? And that's we're not like talking about if you don't pay it this year, shut it off. But if you start to get a situation where for some reason a program went dormant, money
Right.
collected, you still should have an opportunity to get to that money, and that's what we're just asking for.
That's actually a good example, because there are some really specific rules around that too, especially like if you look at any of the student activity accounts,
Yeah.
right, which is altogether different. If money has been collected for a specific purpose, then that doesn't exist anymore. So like trips or like a class is there's like really specific language in the laws about what, if the class of 2025 raises money, what happens with that money after they leave, right? And before it can ever become something else, they have to vote on it. The students have to make that decision, right? And if sometimes you'll have money in an account for a class that's been long gone, and you're like, the law allows you have to jump through some hoops, but the law allows you to eventually bring that into something else so that you can dissolve that. So my first year, one of the things we did is we looked at, actually, while I was still a principal at Stony Brook,
Okay.
we had an audit finding that came back that said, you have a lot of accounts with really small amounts in it or nothing. You should get rid of those accounts or just make them inactive so that you can clean all of that up. And so all of those things, there are very specific ways in which you have to do it,
Yeah.
but we are looking at all of that.
Yeah, that's all we were
Yeah.
suggesting.
I looked at, it's part of the last year and a half with the Finance Committee and Jenny's hard work. A lot of these non-general funds, we had that. One of was like conference care, right? Because
Yeah.
there was like this service for, if it was parent-teacher conference
Yeah.
morning, the kids could be in the cafeteria and stuff, and there was like a small balance left over, like you said, but the program's no longer happening. And so I counted, last I checked, up to 15 of those that are closed in the last year through hard work of Jenny, or are closing soon and are on our radar. So what we're keeping is gonna get a dedicated page explaining it, and then if we're not keeping it, we're actively working on that too.
Watching our pennies, that's good.
So it sounds like it's also a lot of research for some of these to figure out what the purpose was, because descriptions don't always tell what it really was, right? So I do appreciate Jenny looking back and reaching out to predecessors to get some of that history.
But oftentimes, if you, when you make the initial, you address the problem initially, it's a little involved. Once you get it cleared, if you can pass the line, it'll move a lot faster.
Yes.
Anything else on this? Let's keep going.
So we just have three more that we'll quickly touch base on. So the other large driver that we were looking at was options for our health insurance. We are partially self-insured. That happened in March of 2022. All of us know that at the end of fiscal 23, we had a negative fund balance of $387,000. We did influx $950,000 of free cash to plug that balance. We're happy to report that our experience has been a lot better for fiscal 24. The unaudited fiscal 24 balance was $1.085 million, an increase of $1.4 million over the last year. As of the end of September, we have a cash balance of $2.48 million. We're starting to get our October information in. That's actually looking fairly good. We had a health insurance trust meeting today. So the cash balance was $671,000 in September of 2023, so an increase of $1.8 million. I want to be clear that the Health Insurance Trust, which is made up of a Finance Committee representative, a Select Board representative, staff, and of the town side as well as school, are still working very diligently to look at, do plan design changes make sense of staying partially self-insured? Does it make sense to go to other options? We did explore MIA, so the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency, where we carry our other insurances from. They denied to quote us most recently because of our experience, but we do continue to drive forward with reviewing other things. I do also want to note that in November of 2023, our broker suggested a 22% increase for our health insurance. Westford is unique that we have a November renewal. Many other municipalities or organizations are a July renewal. That was a 15% increase. November 1st for 2024, our renewal was 8.3. So I'm not saying that we're doing 100% better, but that was a better experience for that. We also rolled out a program in January 2024 for mail-in prescription drugs from Canada through the CanaRx program. We saw our first quarter report that we had about $2,000 worth of savings. Our next quarterly report is due in November. We expect to see additional savings from that. That is for both town employees and for the town/school budgets. But again, I want to be clear that we're still working through this. We're still understanding what's going on. I've had several meetings with health insurance consultants that we may bring on. I have not made that decision yet, but it's an option. And we continue to work with the broker very closely on other options.
Anything, Nate?
Yeah. So I'm the Finance Committee member of the Health Insurance Trust. And Kristen, just want to say appreciate the work you've continued to do on this. I think it's a really important. I think where our experience is right now is great in terms of where we were. Still, 8% is a lot, especially if we consider what our other cost drivers are overall each year. And one of the concerns that I've expressed to Kristen, she just made reference to, is that the exploration of alternatives, including whether or not going to the Group Insurance Commission or Maya, or moving in a different direction, the exploration of that is somewhat limited right now for the town, in that the expertise that we rely on is the broker, who has a potential conflict of interest there, in that if we go to the Group Insurance Commissioner, there is no broker. And so we've discussed that as well. And so to me, looking at the idea of a health insurance consultant, who are people whose business is more flat fee and based on, agnostic to whether or not you choose a particular provider or not, they get paid either way for the work they did to sort of make suggestions, is a different model. And so I will continue to ask for that and encourage us as a town to explore that, because I think that's how we get the appropriate data and objective analysis that we feel, it doesn't potentially have that problem. I will say, I think our broker's done a great job, and, not accusing that of anything, it's just the structure in and of itself has a potential inherent for a conflict of interest. So, I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, and, hope that wherever we end up is something that starts to get this into a place where it's more manageable, but also still balances the needs and of employees and remaining competitive as an employer.
Good, Dennis?
Yeah, well, that was interesting. That was an interesting disclosure about that. Question I have about it is we have had a lot of controversy or discussion about GMIC or the group insurance, and there's never been a really definitive final finding as to whether or not it's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, and what were the issues involved. And that was an interesting point of view that I had not heard before. So, can you give us an update on what the dynamic issue, what the issues are with exploring affiliating with group insurance, as opposed to maintaining our own independent health insurance program?
Sure. I did talk a lot about this at a select board meeting a few months ago, so happy to share that meeting as well.
Thank you.
With us being partially self-insured, we have the ability to shape our own plans in the way that is most beneficial for our taxpayers as well as our residents. For a high plan, a low plan, and a medium range plan. We currently do not have deductibles, so I would say that we have a pretty rich plan in terms of other municipalities. We also have the ability to set our own rates. If we were to go to the GIC, the Group Insurance Commission, the town of Westford does not have the ability to set our own rates. Those rates are set by the Group Insurance Commission board, and the town of Westford would not be a member on that board, is my understanding. Similar with Maya, they set the rates based upon the experience. Excuse me, there's a fruit fly around me. So those are some of the pros and cons related to staying partially self-insured or going to one of those groups.
Have you been able to examine the rate increases and compare the two?
Yes, the Health Insurance Trust has received all that data, has reviewed that, and we did present that to the select board.
Okay.
And we have a full packet that we're happy to share on that.
Okay.
Any other questions from any committee members?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
On the prescription program, what options or levers do we have to increase enrollment in that? Because it looks like two numbers, $2,000, we have hundreds of people.
Yeah, so we just went through open enrollment this past month, so we were really pushing that even more at open enrollment of please look into this. We can't force anyone on that system. Not everyone's prescription drugs go through this particular program, so it has to be a good fit. But we hope to have some of the people who are enrolling in the program talking to their colleagues, saying how much they're saving, how convenient it is, those types of things. So we only started in January, so I feel like it's going to be a slow ramp up, and hopefully we'll see some successive savings after that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that you can correlate, $1,000 per person, because You know, one person may save $10,000, another one
Yeah.
may save $10.
And that's just for a 3-month period, so that was January to April was that, so 3 months. So we'll have some better data in November to share.
Anything else from committee members? We do have a few things online. Okay. There's a couple things online. So Shayna Farnsworth is asking, how many members of the Health Insurance Trust Committee, I think she means Health Insurance Trust, are employees that have access to enroll in the town health plan versus those that are more neutral?
So I think that all of our health insurance trust members are neutral. I just want to make that clear. There are 6 members on the trust. 4 are employees. 1 is a finance committee member, 1 is a select board member. The trust was created through town meeting and through the select board. So it was not created through the town manager in any sense. So I want to be clear on that.
She has another comment. This is Shayna Farnsworth again. Thank you to the FinCom member that mentioned the conflict of interest in using the broker as the central provider of information on this fact-finding mission. I mentioned before that I believe that the broker being involved is not in the best interest of making a more neutral decision. And Christy Bates has a question. What are the current cycles and deadlines so we can understand the timing for potential changes? When might you move into in a different direction?
Sure. So the town is in a unique situation where we have a November renewal. So generally, the select board and the health insurance trust make a decision in the late August, early September timeframe related to those programs. We also, being partially self-insured, have a stop-loss insurance. And that stop-loss is actually off-cycle. It's in the March timeframe because of when we became partially self-insured. The Health Insurance Trust is looking to see if we can bring those two into unison, whether it be November or March. There is a cost associated with bringing that stop-loss in line with the renewal. So that is something that we continue to explore. The stop-loss generally has to be decided upon in the January timeframe for that March renewal.
Kristen, could you also speak to, in the event we went with the Group Insurance Commission, this very specific timelines?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to go with the Group Insurance Commission, the GIC, you need to let them know by, I think, December for a July turnaround, and then by July for a December turnaround. And so we really need to be ahead of that curve to do that movement.
And does Maya have, what are the Maya deadlines if they?
So some communities in Maya are rolling, but generally you need to let them know, I think it's a October for January 1st. It's a little bit less, I don't have the data right in front of me, but it's a little bit less than the GIC, I believe. Notice.
Could I just ask a question, maybe for you, Dr. Chu? But one of the things that surprised me was our November renewal for health insurance and the awkwardness of it. And what I immediately thought of was school employees, where your union contracts are typically on the school year and your hiring happens in the summer. Does that pose a problem right now, or are you able to just work through it in terms of if you hire somebody that they're coming in mid-year in the summer when you do most of your hiring, and then have to immediately pick a plan to switch for the remainder of the year?
Well, I mean, for new hires, that's a change in circumstances for them, so they're able to join at any time.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But you're okay. So you're it's a qualifying event. So you can't. I know they get insurance.
Right.
I was just thinking in terms of you're hiring people, recruiting people for a job. Does it make a difference that this is your insurance only now until October, and then it's going to change? In terms of the plan design or price point.
I personally haven't heard anybody saying that that's a problem. But that would be a good question to ask. Even our HR department.
Yeah, and the town hires all year long, right? And we haven't heard that complaint either. Yeah. So
I wasn't thinking from a town perspective. Specifically, the school department. Most of your hiring, I assume, is in the summer times. For new teachers and people
the bulk
retiring.
of changes take place then. I will say that I've worked in a number of different school systems, and there's been a mixed bag as to, because this has happened in other districts where it was a November 1st. There was the big open enrollment in October, where I have been in other places when it did happen just in July. So.
I mean, I would
it's
say
actually
it's
helpful
HR.
that the teachers are back in session and they can actually be engaged in that open enrollment.
If you were trying to change anything, that's true. If you were trying to do something as people are walking out the door, that I could see that being problematic.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I also was just thinking from, as a finance committee member, the mid-year adjustment of that and how that impacts things versus keeping it to a fiscal year. One of the benefits of the group insurance commission is it's on the fiscal year. Their open enrollment's in April and May, when schools are still in session, and way in advance. But, just how do we consider that in the long run if that's an option moving forward? And then other options are people who are on the calendar year.
Right.
So.
We ready to move on? Yeah.
So just two last things related to efficiencies that we've brought up in the past. I had brought up that we are exploring regionalization with our veterans department. I've been in contact with 2 separate districts that are interested in regionalizing with Westford. However, just wanted to report that our veteran service officer left the position in June. We have a part-time temporary veteran service officer working now, and we're actually receiving some new data and some new information about the services that are expected through the town of Westford related to veterans. So I am reevaluating whether I think it's a good idea to go regional or not related to veteran service, or if we were to go regional, as I've stated in the past, perhaps Westford being the organization that is the host community to keep our expectations higher. So I don't have anything related to costs or anything like that, but it's still in the mix. It's still being investigated, very much in the data collection, but we feel that we are going to be adequately budgeted for veteran service in fiscal 26, and we'll obviously report to these groups if we have any additional data. And then economic development. So I think this is one that's that has started or has continued and has ramped up a little bit more, but will be a little bit of a longer lead to seeing efficiencies or cost savings or revenue generation. So the Economic Development Committee put out an RFP for an economic development consultant. We vetted that consultant and have hired Trost. They're a 2-person consulting firm out of Carlisle, so very local. The first thing that they are doing for us is some branding and marketing related to the town of Westford and our businesses and our climate. They're currently creating some slogans for us and some branding ideas that they plan to bring to the Select Board and the Economic Development Committee in late January. We have been getting some feedback from our business community, some input, feedback. Actually, Dan and I have had some input on the slogans as well, which has been fun. And then they will be helping us create a new, unique Town of Westford Economic Development landing page. Now that we've done the revamp of the website, it's a great time to dress up our economic development page. They also are helping us create a comprehensive database of businesses. Right now it's a little haphazard. WestfordCAT actually has a database. The assessor's office obviously has their database of commercial development. The land use department has some sort of a database, but the consultant is creating one comprehensive database of all businesses that are located in Westford, and then we'll be using that as a catalyst for outreach, for marketing and whatnot. And then I think what's not listed here that the consultant is not doing is we've obviously passed the MBTA zoning for multifamily housing. The planning board has seen 2 conceptual proposals for that over the course of the past few months. We anticipate that permitting will really ramp up on those MBTA community developments over the course of the winter, and that we may see some new growth develop from that through late fiscal 26, but certainly in fiscal 27. So I don't have that on the slide, but through the work of our consultant, through the work of the MBTA zoning, we're really building a cohesive economic plan moving forward. Also, our townwide strategic plan is going to be issued soon through the Select Board, hopefully, and one of those initiatives is economic development in that strategic plan, so we'll roll that into this process as well.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our efficiencies, I believe, right?
Yes, it does.
There's a couple of comments online that kind of go back to some other points, but we were a little too far, so I just waited. One from Shana Farnsworth: when will the rec department deliver a full analysis of their programs? which programs are losing revenue, making revenue? Is there a deadline for them to provide this? It seems that efficiencies within their programs would be a better place to find extra money versus necessarily dipping into free cash. I think maybe she means retained earnings, but I don't know if anyone can speak to that.
So we're not, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, we're not using any general fund money for next year, so you're not going to find money there to fund other parts of the budget.
I'll add to that. So what the Park and Recs Commission has started to do is to look at the programming that the Recreation Department provides. We've broken it into 3 categories. The first one, we did a fairly in-depth analysis and review with the public at our meeting on Monday night, and that was for our waterfront operations that the Recreation Department oversees. We'll be going into what we call our in-house programming next, and that's something like the after-school program, the summer programs that we run, and then the third category is vendor run programming. So this is the programming that the Recreation Department coordinates with other vendors, and we take a cut of the operations revenue for that. So we'll be breaking out those and doing analysis on those 3 categories and bringing it forward in Park and Rec Commission meetings. I do not have a specific time frame for the other 2 categories that we'll be covering, because we have a couple of other high priority items that we've been discussing and we'll be taking up time on the agenda. But as we can fit them in, we're going to bring them in, and my goal is to try and get it done within the next 4 to 6 months.
And I really want to thank Dan and Michelle and Chris for leading that effort. They've put a ton of analysis together and still working to refine that. So tune into the Parks and Rec Commission meetings.
That's right, they're always fun.
Okay, we have a discussion by all agenda item, but I think we've discussed everything previous, unless anyone has anything else to add. Dennis?
Well, Chris, there was some discussion about, you were talking about regionalization. Has there been any further discussion about regionalization of public safety communications at all?
No, there has not.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we could just do a 30-second update on the Robinson School Building Committee and just let the public know where that's going, what's happened in the last couple of months. Does anybody talk to that?
Are you looking at me or at
I don't
Kristen?
know. I'm kind of looking in this direction. I don't even. So this is the problem. I don't even know. I know we
Yeah.
appointed a committee. I don't know who
Right.
is chairing. These are the sort of things
So-
I think might be a good update
Yeah.
for the public just to
Sure.
hear.
So the committee has not met yet. Chris and I have corresponded to see when they should meet. The town has submitted all of the appropriate documents that were due to the MSBA and the September 30th timeframe and the October 30th timeframe. So we're looking to schedule that meeting soon to give the Robinson School Building Committee an update of what we've already done so far. But
There isn't a specific task for them
Correct.
yet either, so it is just kind of to set the stage and to let people know what's going on. On the, we had a couple of deadlines for the 30th. There was another educational profile questionnaire that, and these, as these documents get approved, we're putting them on our website, so we have a website for this project as well too.
And that's on the school's website.
The school, we actually,
there's a
we're
link between
we're
the
doing
two.
one that we're doing the same thing we did with the budgets, that they're gonna point to each other,
Perfect.
so that it's the same, so if they go to one website, they can find it either way. We are in this first eligibility phase of this project, and the next deadlines that exist are actually in January, where we'll just be submitting some more historical information about capital projects and different maintenance issues and things like that. But there isn't a specific task other than organizing for the Robinson School Building Committee to actually do anything yet. So we're just kind of trying to figure out when would be a good time to get that ball rolling. But yes, it has been established. The members have all been selected, so we just have to meet.
Thank you for the update.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add on efficiencies or? I think the only thing that I have a question on is, are we going to be adding any more efficiencies onto our list, taking them from the budget task force, and are they going to be sort of bubbling up to the top of the priority?
I think with the preparation of the fiscal 26 budget right now and the list that we have before us, I'd like to focus on what we have now before we jump to anything else. I think all the other items were a little bit lower in terms of cost savings, or may not even be cost savings. So in my opinion, I'd like to focus on these items, have a little bit more data to bring to the groups before we engage in something else. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Chris.
No, I'd agree.
I think the nature of Prop 2.5 is that, again, like we said earlier, we have to find efficiencies every year. So, if we identify, we will have to find something because we have limited resources, and other costs will just continue to increase above that 2.5. So, I just think out of necessity, we may percolate some of those up.
Okay, well, that leads us into our next agenda item, which is the review of the FY26 budget schedule.
So Dan will bring that up and go through the schedule.
All right, so here we have the timeline coming up. On December 9th, on December 9th, Dr. Chu will present the school budget presentation at the school committee meeting. The following night, we'll have Kristen will present the town manager budget presentation at the select board meeting with the FinCom attending. And then as we get into January, after the holidays, we have our budget hearings starting on January 9th for 4 straight Thursday nights. We kept the same schedule as last year, so it's should look familiar there. Hopefully we finish up by the 30th. If not, I know last year we had a lot more questions, and we added one additional meeting at the end. So we'll see how we're doing there. And then running into February, the Finance Committee will be meeting on February 13th and 27th to review all the financial articles for town meeting. And the Select Board has their meeting scheduled for February 25th and March 11th. And then this is tentative meeting for the League of Women Voters town meeting preview. We're looking at March 13th, which is a Thursday. And of course, we end with our town meeting on Saturday, March 22nd at WA.
Okay, Dennis?
Quick question, is there any indication about a deficit so far in the budget?
So we were originally planning for a $3.6 million deficit with the override not passing. We are still analyzing a lot of information, so I don't want to bring any false information to the committees or the public this evening. I think there will be somewhat of a deficit, but again, don't want to speak to specific numbers because both the schools and the town side are still working through things, and there's still data that we're collecting.
Very good, thank you.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the schedule? So it did seem earlier to me, just everything hitting in January rather than it seemed like our fun Thursdays were all February before.
No, we just had more budget road shows. That's why, Chris. Yes. There's less road shows this year.
My question was this though. So if this is just the schedule that we've used in the past, the way that this is falling out, the school committee has 3 meetings before they vote on the actual budget, and I didn't know if it would be possible to swap to have the public schools go on the 23rd instead of the 16th. It would just give the school committee another opportunity, because of the way that their cycles are every 2 weeks.
And just to clarify here, like, the terminology budget hearing, I think of like, public hearings for.
Right. Which is one of the things that we have to do. The school committee has to have their own.
National grid polls or whatever you do, right? Like, for those that don't know, MGL, I think it's chapter 71 or something, mandates that the school budget has to have a newspaper announcement for a budget hearing, and we hold that ourselves. And I think it even goes so far to say it has to be scheduled so that the school committee can react to the feedback, right? So we can't do that at a FinCom meeting because we vote before it goes to the review, but we also can't do it the same night as a vote because then we're not giving enough time for review. And we had the same reaction, but like, if it's because the winter break is sort of longer too this year, it just felt very cramped for us to try to have a meeting.
But I don't know if there needs
discuss
to
it,
be 2 weeks
have a hearing.
between the follow-up. That's my question, would it be feasible if those were swapped, or does that put a burden on Health, Human Services, and Public Safety?
I think we could talk about that offline between
Okay.
between us and figure out what works. I think
It would make
that's-
scheduling easier for our end
I
if
think,
we did that.
Yeah, I think historically we've had 2 weeks in between your two visits to give
Yeah.
you time
Right,
to
which is
answer
appreciated.
follow-up questions, but, so we can,
Okay.
we can work on that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on
Did we hit everything on
this?
Zoom?
I think we did. Oh, wait, there's one more. Okay, Christy Bates is asking, when will you decide if there will be an override?
Let's do the budget first.
God, would you like to field that one?
We haven't seen the budget yet. Last year, the vote was, I believe, January-ish, so I'd say probably the same time frame this year.
Alrighty.
In late January-ish at that. I mean, we want to get through the FinCom hearings as much as we can, but still a lot of time for
I think we lost
educating the.
They can't hear us anymore.
Oh,
Yep.
It just got unplugged?
It got unplugged. It fell in. It fell in.
was plugged in?
Who had it plugged in? The owl.
No, it's
There's
there's
like
an
an extender.
It's an extender somewhere down there.
Oh, there it is.
So I guess, I don't know, we lost people, but,
I think you might take a second, but. You asked a question and you just unplugged.
The key question.
still here.
Can you hear us at home?
There's a button on the
Or
phone.
Tom or Will, or Bill? Okay, they can hear us.
Okay.
Tom says yes.
so we want the benefit of as much FinCom input as we can have, and clearly the FinCom has got a voice in recommending the override as well, so I would say it's late January, early February to give us enough time to understand the numbers and also educate the public if we actually have to go forward with the override request. So no hard date, late January, early February.
Okay.
It will be before we close the warrant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're going to get into, approving minutes, so I don't know if there's anything else that anyone needs to say or
Last
wants
call.
to say. Yeah, kind of a last call. Okay. So let's look at our June 27th, 2024 meeting minutes, and since they are for all three boards, we're just going to do this all together. Yes, Nate?
Can I request an edit?
Yes.
I'm not listed as present, and it says that our term started July 1, but that John Fryer and I were here. My term actually started June 17th, and I was already sworn in by this meeting.
Interesting. Okay.
So if I could be added to the Finance Committee present to get credit for my
So
finance.
noted.
Likewise. You get paid for your hours.
John, were you not listed? John Fryer, were you not listed as present either, or?
No,
He-
I was here as well.
Okay,
He
yeah,
was
yeah.
here, but
I'm not
I believe,
listed.
John, your term did start July 1, which might have been why it wasn't listed.
No,
in
I
the
think it
finance
started as soon as I was sworn in,
Oh, okay, then maybe.
because there were
We'll check
vacancies.
that with the clerk.
But-
So then the other thing is that there's a note that says, when Christina, when you introduced us, that our terms start July 1, so that would have to be just addressed too. So if that could just be cleaned up with those amendments.
Sure. Okay,
go.
so could I get a
Motion to
motion
approve
to
with
approve?
amendments?
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, we're going to go through. Chris?
I
Scott?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Valerie?
Abstain.
Aye.
Shelby? Nate?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
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 And who's online? Bill McDonald
Tom.
Tom Clay.
Aye.
and Tom Clay? Okay, and is that,
Catherine still on?
I don't see anyone else.
I never,
I saw
she
her.
had her screen off, I think.
Oh, wait, Catherine, yeah.
Yeah,
Catherine?
sorry, I confirmed to hear you guys. Yes,
Okay, I think we're good. All right, so that passes. Next is a discussion around our efficiencies meeting. So Since we are coming hot and heavy into the budget season, it doesn't make a lot of sense, I don't think, to hold these efficiencies meetings at least through, March or so. So we'll take a little pause on these until at least the springtime, and then we'll probably pick them up again, I assume.
Effectively, every January meeting will be an efficiencies meeting.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's it, unless anyone has anything else, we can adjourn.
So moved.
Right, in a second?
Second.
All right, and we're just gonna wave, because there's too many to go through. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.